after I graduated,
Mhm.
I moved back down with my friends in Florida
Okay.
and realized that I didn't want to be there anymore. Like, no, I'm going to go right back up. It's like,
Okay.
I was down there for probably about.
My name is Adam, by the way, and this is about you and your journey in music. And obviously, we'll talk about the new record, which I love. It's so good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. And then you have a tour coming up too. We can talk about as
Yeah,
well.
sure do.
Awesome. I know. We're not going to spend too much time on BoySetsFire, but I wonder if you
Mhm.
are willing to touch on it a bit because it's about this is
Sure.
about your story, and obviously that's a big part of it, I would imagine.
Gotcha. Yeah, sure.
Awesome, awesome. So first off, where were you born and raised?
I was actually born and raised, let's see, back in 1972
Okay.
in Wilmington, Delaware, and at a hospital that doesn't exist anymore, Wilmington General.
Really?
And yeah,
When did it
and
close down? Any idea?
I want to say it was like 10, 20 years ago, but I'm not really
Okay.
sure. Immediately after I was born. Why?
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah, they're like, so
They're like, screw this, we're
2 years
done.
later, they just knocked the building down.
Right. Mm. But yeah, so, and I lived in Delaware until I was probably about 11, I
Okay.
think 11. And then we moved down to Florida, Pensacola, Florida, right under Alabama. It's a
Mhm.
area of Florida that the rest of real Florida doesn't really call Florida. Yeah.
Right, which is
It's
a
more
beautiful
Alabama
area.
Junior. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and lived there probably, I mean, most of my high school life. We moved back into this area in Maryland and Delaware when I was 19. So finishing up 12th grade. And then I've been in this area for since then.
Wow. Did you say you finished high school in Maryland? You moved back
Yeah,
for like
yeah.
senior year?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah. It was like right at I want to say it was either at the beginning of senior year or it was at the end of my junior year. I can't remember. Like it's all such a
Yeah.
blur
But that must have been
moving, but
rough. I mean,
oh
leaving
yeah.
the school right before you're about to graduate.
Yeah, it was awful, but it was after. What was funny is that after I graduated, I
Mhm.
moved back down with my friends in Florida
Okay.
and realized that I didn't want to be there anymore. Like, no, I'm going to go right back up. It's like, so
Okay.
I was down there for probably about 8 months before I went, and now, no, Dad, I need a bus ticket. I'm done.
Okay. And then you went back up.
Mhm.
Right
Yeah,
on.
and since then I've lived in so this area. I live in Elkton, Maryland. Right
Mhm.
across the line is Newark, Delaware, and across the other line is Landenberg, Pennsylvania. So I live in an area where you can stand in three states at one time. So
That
it's
is
real up
crazy.
close here. Yeah.
See, I don't know a whole lot
So
about the East
yeah.
Coast just because I'm a West Coast guy. I'm originally from San
Mhm.
Diego. I live in Nashville now. We just moved, but
Okay.
recently. But yeah, like when it comes to the East Coast, there's so many states. Like, I mean, California was like you drive the whole state, it takes you 12 hours or whatever, and you can go through
Yeah.
so many states on the
Oh, it's
East
crazy.
Coast.
Everything's so pushed up together, and you're near every major city in this area,
Mhm.
like New York, Philly, DC, Baltimore. Like everything is within quick driving distance. Like so, I grew up in Delaware and Maryland, sort of in this area. My wife grew up in Landenberg, PA. But everybody from this area sort of hung out in the Newark, Delaware area because that was like the college town.
Okay.
Um, so that was sort of everybody was from Newark, but nobody was from Newark.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
That's interesting. That's super interesting. When it
yeah.
came to shows and stuff, and seeing bands, I'm sure that's great. Or even being in a band, you could travel
What was
close.
really cool about it was that not only, and this will sort of get into Boys at Fire territory, is that um, so all the major cities were close by, but
Mhm.
also it was pretty easy to start a scene here. During the early 90s, when Boy Sets Fire was coming around, I was also putting on shows with a collective that did shows here, and people from Baltimore, New York, Philly, stuff like that would come here to see shows as well. and we were able to get a lot of really cool bands here in this area. Since it was a college town and close to so many cool cities,
Mhm.
it just worked out.
That is
It was great.
amazing. That is awesome.
And
I
that
wanna
really helped BoySetsFire sort of build who we were outside of this area. with
Okay,
that.
was it kinda like trading shows almost? Like, okay, somebody
I,
who comes through here, you can jump down there, or
we did that. We did that to an extent, but also it was just easy to get because a lot of bigger bands needed shows between cities. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So we would be that spot. We would be this little podunk college town in the middle of nowhere that people would drive through from like Baltimore to Philly or Baltimore to New York, DC to New York, something like that,
Mhm.
where they'd need a show, but it wasn't in like a major city or too
Right.
close within a radius clause or whatever, you know?
Sure.
So we would put those shows on and we got a bunch of like Fugazi played here,
Oh, wow.
Bouncing Souls, you know, like bigger bands, punk
Right.
bands would come and play and it was great.
That is awesome. I mean,
Mhm.
Fugazi and the Bouncing Souls in the I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
would be
yeah. It was
quite
great.
the yeah, that is so
Yeah.
rad. Well, getting even further back than Boy Sets Fire, how did you get into music?
That was actually in my 10th grade year was when I first started experimenting with bands. Now I've
Mhm.
always been into music because like growing up, both my parents sing and play guitar.
Oh,
So it
awesome.
was like, and they always had music, but a lot of the music was either like folk music, like Bob Dylan or Peter, Paul and Mary or Simon and Garfunkel,
Mhm.
or they'd have like musicals like Les Mis and Man of La Mancha and West Side Story. So it was a pretty interesting growing up and figuring out what I liked of music because that's really all I had was
Mhm.
that and then like church music because my dad's a pastor so that was all I really knew of music but probably around 10th grade and maybe a little bit before is when I first started discovering punk
Okay.
and started like really discovering that that was the style that I was into. That was the thing, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
And and that was when it started. And I remember a friend of mine whose name was Bart. In 10th grade, we would get together in my kitchen and pretend like we were a band, even though we really couldn't play our ins. I was trying to play bass. He was trying to play guitar. Neither of us could play crap, so we'd just sit around and listen to the Clash and the Exploited and Dead Kennedys and like all these different bands and just wish we could emulate them, you know?
Okay.
But we weren't even that good, you know?
You, was bass your first instrument then, or did you
Nope.
play prior to that?
Singing was always my first instrument,
Okay.
but bass was the first thing I picked up when I wanted to try to play something. And
Mhm.
to be honest, I only did it because it was four strings. Like it was like,
Oh,
oh, this
okay.
looks easy. It's not easy. I still can't play bass to this day. I have been able to teach myself guitar and piano at least so that I can write.
Mhm.
Bass completely eludes me. Like people who play bass like a guitarist are not playing correctly. Like
Uh-huh.
the things that bass players come up with blows my mind. Like when
Sure.
they come up with like a part, and I'm like, where did you hear that? It sounds great, but how did you hear that happening? Like, you know, it's a completely other part that blends in, and it just has never made sense to me.
Yeah,
But
because
I
there's the
tried.
people that follow just like, okay, like we need a bass player, and then it's the guy that doesn't want to
Right.
play bass and he's just
Yeah, yeah,
following the
yeah.
root note. But yeah, when you
Right.
see a bass player that can play bass, it's
Yeah.
like another
Which is
level.
yeah, which is it was awesome. Jed, who played bass on Rebel Songs,
Uh-huh.
it was great having him come in because he's a actual real live bass player. And and the stuff he would come out with would just rearrange songs completely. He'd start doing something. I'm like, how does that fit? Like it does. I don't know how. Here, let's change this stuff around and like sort of let that like ride out and like, you know, and it was awesome to have like a real live bass player that played real live bass lines. Like,
Mhm. Sure. You talked about singing. Was that something you gotten into like when you're going through the church? I know a lot of people that's where they started kind of
yeah.
cutting their teeth in
Well,
live performances and
yeah, it was between that and school. I was in all the choir classes, and we did actually like competitions, like all state competitions and
oh,
stuff.
rad.
It was just I've always just loved to sing. It just
Uh-huh.
always made me happy. It was always my favorite way of either you know cheering myself up or just getting out things that suck. You know what I mean? Being able to sing them out was a big deal for me. And funny story, in kindergarten, I didn't realize that musicals weren't real life, that you couldn't just break into song in a situation. And I still remember this to this day. I was in kindergarten and this little girl that was a friend of mine, she was sad. So we're talking and all of a sudden I break out into this song. And she looked at me like I had lost my damn mind and then starts laughing and it completely broke me for a little while. Like,
you're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I'm supposed to do.
That's not what you do when people are sad. Like on Sesame Street and in musicals, when people are sad, all of a sudden the talking turns into a song and like everybody gets up and dances together. We don't do that here. Like, blew my mind that wasn't a thing.
That is so funny. Wow. So you did like competitions and stuff growing up. Wow.
Yeah.
My son is I have a older, he's 13 and he's in middle school and we put him in choir and chorus because he's always singing around the house and this is his first year and he's all like kind of ashamed of it. Like he doesn't want to like tell people he's in it. I'm like, and so I'm going to show him this and be like, look.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah. I was first tenor and I loved it. I thought it was great. Like the, I get it because like nobody else at my school thought it was cool,
right.
But I'm going to be honest with you. I wasn't cool regardless. So it wasn't going to help or hurt me.
Okay.
It was only going, I had friends within the choir class and in drama club,
Okay.
But that doesn't get you any fans outside of those small little groups, and that's just something that, unfortunately, sometimes pursuing what you really love in life isn't going to be popular. It's not going to be something that everyone around you is going to go, oh, that's so cool you're doing that. But what really matters at the end of the day, is it making you happy? Is it making you a complete person? Because the second you give that up for other people is the second you lose everything.
I love that. I love that. I definitely need to show him this because I'm telling him, I'm like, you like these singers and people are doing all this stuff. And I'm like, they don't just wake up one day and get good at it. Like it's an instrument, it's a muscle that you have to work and see you were in chorus and then you're in a band that becomes really successful. And obviously your solo career is successful. And you've probably played shows with some of the people that you looked up to growing up as a teenager. And I mean, that's just, what a life, it's like, I was trying to explain to him, like, you're in high school for 4 years and people put so much pressure on that, but it's like, no one cares. It doesn't even matter.
When you get out of high school and you're several years out of that, you're going to look back at that and like with what was I so concerned about back then?
Right.
Like, it's just like, it means nothing. And none of those people, unless you have like some dear friends that you carry with you, you're never going to see those people again.
Exactly.
Like you're just not like
exactly.
So, and they'll have no influence over your life whatsoever. And the cool thing is that most of us who do this, who do music, who go on to gain some form of success or whatever, it's good to go through this stage for your son to be humble later on. To sort of allow yourself to go through that stage is important because now when people want to, like this, you want to talk to me. That's crazy. You know what I mean? Like that's insane. And like how grateful I am for that now, because that was never my experience when I was younger. If somebody wanted to talk to me, it probably meant they were coming to kick my ass. Like, it wasn't going to be fun. You know what I mean? Like, so, and other than that, people just ignored the shit out of me. So now when people like want to interview me or want an autograph or want to talk to me, like it's the most amazing thing in the world because of that, you know what I mean? And you take that humility from that and that grateful heart from that,
I completely agree.
Or at least I would hope you would. I know some people don't, but.
And that guy that wanted to kick your ass or whatever, that was, the jock in high school or peaking in high school, like he's probably doing nothing nowadays. Like you look up those people and you're like, oh, you still live there and do that.
I actually feel bad because my bully in high school's name was Larry Terry.
Birth
No
name?
wonder he
Larry
was a
Terry.
bully. My God. Like, yeah. And now, like, it's so funny because you look back at those bullies and how much you hated them. And honestly, now I sort of like want to find them and give them a hug. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Feel
Like,
sorry for him.
I sort of get it, man. Like,
Right.
if that was my name, I'd feel like I'd have to prove myself too. You know what I mean? Like, there was
Sure.
probably a lot of pressure on you. I'll be honest, you know? So, yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, moving it forward a little bit here. So you talked about being, 10th grade, so 15, 16 years old, playing bass or trying to play bass with your buddy.
Yeah.
Like, when did that form into, when did you start your first band? Was that later or was that still in those high school years?
It was still in high school years, but it was like right at the tail end, right before I moved. And that's actually why I had moved back to Florida, because I had friends in a band and I wanted to go back to doing that. And it wasn't worth going back to. But the I started playing in a band.
Mhm.
And we played shows at this place called the Night Owl in Pensacola, Florida. And it was called Second Nature was the band. And that was my first real shot at being in a band. I
Okay.
remember that, like, they had a singer before me and it wasn't working out because the guy couldn't really sing. And I remember trying out for this band singing it was Mother by Danzig.
Oh, rad.
And they were like, oh, hell yeah, you're in. I was like, cool, awesome. And we just skate and play music. And then we started actually playing shows out. Funny story, as I seem to have these funny stories that connect to everything, but like,
Which I love.
this guy, Gus Brandt, who used to put on all our shows. He was the scene in Pensacola, Florida. He would do all the shows. He ran a college station, all this stuff. Like, he was the man. He did everything. He brought punk and hardcore music to Pensacola, Florida, in our little area. And later down the road, BoySetsFire played a festival with Foo Fighters in Europe. And I was walking backstage and I walked past this room and I stopped. I'm like, Gus? And he looks up. He was like tour managing for them or whatever. Like,
Whoa.
and it was so crazy. Like, and it's funny because after that, I was able to get like my friends like free passes to Foo Fighter shows and stuff.
That's so rad.
But it was so cool that like that is what he went on to do, like, and be successful and get all this stuff. And I love it. I love that, like, somebody that made such an impact on my life during that time went on to do big things in what he was great at doing, you know? So, but that was where it got started.
That's so cool. So that band, you moved back, or you moved north back to Delaware area, and you finished high school there, and then you went back down to Florida to continue playing in this band, and then
to try and continue playing it. To this day, still one of the guitarists, Brian Wilson, is still a good friend of mine. We keep in touch. The other guys I don't really keep in touch with, and unfortunately, one of the other guys, Brian Shoemaker, passed away recently. But the other guys I don't really keep in touch with that much. But it was it's funny because, like, Brian Wilson and I will still get in touch every once in a while and talk about it, and like, or if I'm down in Pensacola, like he doesn't live there anymore, but we would sometimes meet up and stuff. But yes, but when I went back down there, we sort of tried to get it back going again. It just wasn't sparking, and I had my own issues to deal with. So I ended up homeless, not really knowing what I was going to do, where I was going.
Wow.
And I remember we had gone to New Orleans because you could drink and stuff underage there.
Sure.
And I remember, I can't remember what happened. I passed out there. I got left there somehow. I got a ride back somehow. Ended up with some friend of mine who was stealing from his mom and like pawned her stuff. And we almost got arrested for that. Like, it was this crazy ordeal, but I got some kind of stomach bug and everything was just so awful. And I remember calling my dad and like, can you just buy me a bus ticket? I need to come home. I can't, like, everything's falling apart. Everything's wrong. I can't do it. And he was awesome and got me back home. And I stayed with my parents for a little bit until I could, get a place of my own. But it was a real bummer going back.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing that your dad was so supportive to be like, and like the fact that you saw that and you're like, this is not good for me. Because I found myself in a similar
that was
situation
going
when I lived
nowhere.
in San Francisco. I had to do the same thing. I'm
Mhm.
like, my life is
Yeah,
like totally out of whack. So I called him. I'm like, I need to get home. And
yeah,
he
yeah,
ended up coming up, grabbing me and the few things I had and
yeah,
drove me back to
yeah.
San Diego. But it's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing too. It gives you a lot of perspective on how close we all are to falling off that edge,
Sure.
and if you don't have that kind of support system, like I have wonderful parents who would do anything for me,
Mhm.
but if I were in that situation and like say my parents were dead or I didn't speak with my parents or whatever, who knows where I'd be now? I could be dead now.
Right.
I could be living on the street out of my damn mind. Like who
Mhm.
knows? So it gives you a lot of perspective when you see others who haven't had that opportunity to realize that it's not as easy as it is sometimes for folks like us
Right.
who have
Right.
that support system.
It's very easy. You're like towing the line. It's very easy to crash and burn if you don't, especially if you don't have anyone to
Yeah,
help you out.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. So you make it back home, you get the bus ticket,
Hmm.
you make it back home. Do you start a band again when you get up there? Or like, are you kind of over
Several.
it or okay?
No, no. I immediately started trying to get bands together and did wrote some songs, did this and that, and I so within this time period, somewhere in here, and it gets a little like jumbled in my head, but it was before I moved back to Florida. I had actually started a band with Chad from BoySetsFire called Jones Chapel, and
Okay.
we were doing like some prog metal weird shit, and I had moved away. When I moved back, Chad and I started doing music again, but also I was doing music with some other people as well. Now I broke off from what Chad and I was doing to do like just some pretty basic melodic punk stuff in this band called Nine.
Mhm.
And it was, I want to say that during that time period, Chad and Josh from Boy Sets Fire, because it's so much. Like I was also doing another band with Josh and doing a band with Chad separately, and they didn't really know each other.
Wow.
And
Were you singing for
so,
all these projects real quick? Yeah.
yes, yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
writing lyrics for all of these
Oh
projects?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh my
absolutely.
gosh. Was it hard
So
to kind of decipher what you were
no, I mean, I was young and I could just do whatever, it was just like, it didn't matter. But also I
Okay.
have this, like, I'm constantly going. I don't, I create hours in the day. I don't know, but
Okay.
so I broke off from both of those bands to do this band called Nine. I was doing that. And while I was doing that, Chad got married to the sister of the woman Josh had married.
Oh, interesting.
So they're brother-in-laws now. So they start hanging out. I had tried to get them to hang out forever so we could be in a band together and they wouldn't do it. All of
Okay.
a sudden they're best friends,
they're,
and I'm all,
yeah, they're family
yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. So the funny part is I'm in this band that I'm miserable in.
Right.
Because I obviously like Voice It's Fire and what I do now is very politically and socially the message,
Mhm.
and the band I was in didn't want to do that. They didn't care. They hated it, doing anything like that. So I was miserable within that. And I remember I had just gone through, I was about to quit the band anyway, because we ran into a lot of drama within where like we were actively fighting about what the message was behind the band and all that kind of shit. And I was just real bummed out about the whole thing. Um, Josh and Chad get in touch with me because they'd been talking about creating this political band that like tours and does all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And they had all these dreams. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm in. Let's
Mhm.
do this. So we found a bass player and a drummer, and that's where Boy Sets Fire started. We started doing practicing at Chad's house and did a song called Bucket of Rain that was released on Creep Records in Pennsylvania on a compilation. And that was the first thing we did. And it just went from there.
Wow. Did
And then
you
we
know
just
that there's
went
something
label jumping.
special? Yeah. Was there like when you that band, did you know that there's something special about it versus anything else you were doing?
Uh, just in that, how connected we were on our mission. You know what
Okay.
I mean? There
Hmm.
was a definite, like, the message, the music, everything had a mission to it. You know what I mean? And we were all on that same page. I mean, obviously we'd argue, all bands argue, but like,
Right.
but the main mission of everything was always the same. And we were also connected on it, that's what made it feel special, whether it was going to blow up and succeed or not, which we had no hope for it to do, you know? And then the mid 90s happened. And what we were doing just happened to fall in line with what was going on, you know? Hardcore was such a bizarre place. It was awesome. It was this DIY. It's really hard to explain that time period to people now, you know, because it's hard to understand why it worked and how. But hardcore wasn't like, if you say the word hardcore now, it's not the same. Trust me. It's like, you know, you think heavy music. It wasn't always, you know what I mean? If you listen back to some BoySetsFire stuff, it wasn't. But you had bands that were, hardcore was an ethic. It was an idea. So you would have bands at these hardcore festivals that were, I mean, you could take a band like Split Lip, which was practically country to an extent at some points, and then like some pop punk band, and like take all these alternative styles that you hear. Those were all under the umbrella of hardcore. And a lot of times within the same band, like us, like where it's just like, we blended all kinds of shit together. It was so crazy. So, and the singing and screaming thing that we did within the band, it was just us and I think Gray doing that at that time. And,
which is crazy to think because of all the bands that do that now. I mean, right?
Yeah, now it's, and what's great about it, I think other people wouldn't love this, but I love it. I think it's cool that there are bands now that have no idea who BoySetsFire is that do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of cool that you can see, I don't need the accolades. You know what I mean? It's like, I just think it's cool to watch that something can be that far pushed, that your legacy can be so far pushed down the line that by the time it gets down here, people don't even know who you are.
Right.
And that's that's how you sort of infect the culture, I guess. You know what I mean? And it's just sort of cool. I like it.
Interesting that you're just like, yeah, it's fine. Cause I mean, with egos and stuff, especially in the industry, like I would assume you'd be like, people would get bitter about that. Like what irritates me is, okay, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, you can, but what good's it going to do you? You know? I mean, it's going to make you sound like a bitter dick. Why would you put out that energy to people? You know? And I think most people love to hear a story of someone appreciating music and appreciating what their legacy has done over these kids today. Who wants to hear grandpa saying that? Nobody wants to hear you saying that. You know what I mean? And it's okay if you feel that way sometimes. I feel that way sometimes, where it's just like, you're sort of bummed that you don't get the respect or whatever. But honestly, at the end of the day, I don't fucking deserve any respect for it. I did what I did, you know, like it's, nobody owes me anything. I just love to be able to look out in a positive manner and think, I know where that came from. You know what I mean? And and it's just sort of cool. It's a cool little thing I get to know, you know?
That's so amazing. That's such a great outlook too. Cause I'm thinking, like, I remember when the whole like emo scene kind of came back and like people like emo night and all that stuff. And I'm like, they're like, oh, like Panic at the Disco. I'm like, like to me, that's not an emo band. Like emo bands were back with Sunny Day Real Estate and even probably prior to that. Yeah. And it's like, nobody even knows those bands are now. I mean, people know them, but they don't associate it all like how the structure kind of happened.
It's funny how emo changed too, because even so you had like the Sunny Day area, which you can easily sort of see how like Panic at the Disco, stuff like that came from that version. Right. But then if you take it back even further, I mean, if you take it back real far to like Rites of Spring and stuff like that, you can even sort of see that melodic thing. But there was this time in the 90s where emo was like Universal Order of Armageddon. Like it was like literally dudes throwing their guitars against the wall, falling on the ground and crying. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was almost like overly intense. Like you were like, I don't know if I should be watching this. Like, you know, it's like, you know, there were bands that were like, it was what Screamo came from.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you go and look at what you would call screamo, if you go back, Klickitat, Ikitawi, these bands from San Diego and even around this area, Philly and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
there were these bands that were emotionally intense. Like it was just this like, it was almost like looking at a therapy session, like a
Right.
screaming therapy session. And so to me, that's what emo was. Emo was, I feel uncomfortable being here during this, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that was sort of part of the aesthetic and the ethic of it, was that everybody just sort of was, it was almost like this primal scream therapy, you know, for
Right.
everybody, and everybody would just break down, and it was like, it was intense. So that's what emo was for me, you
That's
know.
crazy because I mean, I knew there's obviously bands prior to like, because when I off my head, I'm thinking like, you know, American football or Texas is the
Yeah,
Reason, stuff like that,
yeah,
which
oh
is
yeah,
considered emo, but they obviously
yeah,
drew influence from bands even further behind them, which is
yeah.
probably
And
like
then
what you're
they,
talking about.
yeah, they probably would have drawn a lot of from like Rites of Spring and the DC
Uh-huh.
area emo stuff, which was more melodic and sort of upbeat and like whatever. But this stuff was just, well, it's what screamo was born out of.
Yeah, that's
But
crazy.
it's yeah, it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Unless you can go back and see some of those shows, it's almost impossible to understand.
I know.
It
Just
was
you
just,
explaining it like, oh
yeah,
man, I wish I was there.
yeah, it was like the singer like screaming poetry over top of really intense nonsensical music, like noise,
Hmm.
and just like everybody just fall, like there were bands that like the second they start they just hit the ground, like, and the instruments go flying everywhere, and just like it was, it was insane.
That's crazy. But I mean, wow, to be one of the, I mean, one of a couple of bands to start that whole screaming
Yeah,
singing scene, like,
yeah,
man, that's so cool. That is so cool.
it is
What
very cool, it's nice.
what would you say, like just not to stay on Boy Sets Fire for too long, but
Mhm.
like when did you start seeing like the next step of the band, like success? Was it like after, you know, touring a bunch of years, or was there like a song or something that happened with the band that kind of elevated you to this next level of, you know, people
there
noticing you or fan base growing?
there were a couple of things. There was, number one, the thing that started growing us was the message,
Okay.
and the actions that we put behind the messages at the time.
Hmm.
There were incidences where, you know, one of the big things was we played a More Than Music festival. I was just talking about this recently with someone, but so there was another band that had played, and this woman had accused them, the singer, of sexually assaulting her.
Oh
And
wow.
he was a complete piece of shit about it and
Hmm.
called her a bitch from stage, all this stuff. And the mob mentality of the audience was terrifying, and was just like screaming at her, and like obviously like whether it was true or not, she was having a mental breakdown,
Hmm.
and she was treated like garbage, and it was horrific. um, we played the next day, and we decided to not play. We got up, everybody was ready, and it was like, look, we're not playing. We said what had happened. I said how disappointing it was to see that in the music scene, and then gave our time for anyone that wanted to come up and talk about their experiences with sexual assault, with rape, things of that nature, to just use this time to speak out without being harassed, without being criticized, without being yelled at. And it led to several bands stopping their time. The band Braid did the same
Oh
thing
wow.
after us. They joined in, and it was great to see. And that honestly elevated a lot of what we were doing, because people saw that it wasn't just about music. It wasn't just about um, proclaiming a message. It was
Right.
about actually stopping and going, wait a minute, not here. You know what I mean? We have created this scene for a purpose. We have created this message for a purpose, and we are going to stick by it and stand by it regardless of what anyone thinks. Um,
Wow.
so
That is amazing. Oh my
so
gosh.
then so then past that, I mean, obviously, like when you have a message like that, it attracts people, and it attracts
Mhm.
people who have been hurt, who have been broken, who have been abused and taken advantage of. And so a lot of our message resonated with people like that. So they would
Mhm.
come and they would want to talk, and it was heavy for a while. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, when you have to play counselor after playing, it is rough, and I still do that today. And it's a difficult blessing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? To be able to help
Right.
people, but sometimes you got to go, oh, give me a second. Oh my God. Like, you know, so, but after that, after the eulogy came out,
Mhm.
and we had a very good, honestly, we had a very good PR guy that just had us, you know, me doing interviews all the time, all this stuff, and really just bolstered the band past what we could do,
Mhm.
and did a wonderful job. So that was really what, you know, from our underground cult sort of following, who were very attracted to the message and everything behind it. Giro, who was our PR guy at the time for after the eulogy, just really blew it out of the water from there for us.
Wow. That's that. Yeah. Cause I mean, I remember seeing you guys in San Diego it wasn't that long ago. Maybe it was
Mhm.
2010 or so. Like, it
Mhm.
was one of the later times that you played, and you played the Casbah, and it was like
Yeah.
so good.
Thank you.
But wow. Okay. So when you like with BoySetsFire, and obviously you're still in the band, right? It's still
Mhm.
it's still going, but
Yeah.
you've been doing this solo project for a while.
Mhm.
And from what I read was that you started to do that because you're kind of trying to steer away from the politics in the lyrics, or
Mhm.
no?
Well, I'll explain that a little bit better, because yes, to
Okay.
an extent, but not really.
Okay.
It was so Voice That's Fire. It'll just always be an entity that's there,
Right.
even if we never play again. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's just sort of like it's a thing. You know,
Hmm.
it's a band.
Right.
We broke up for a while, and it was like, well, let's not do that again, because you never know. Maybe 10 years from now, we'll want to play a quick show. You know,
Hmm.
but it is for all extents and purposes sort of defunct, I guess.
Hmm.
But we'll do some stuff here and there.
Sure.
So you don't want to call it broken up. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Because then it just looks like you're doing money grabs. You
Right.
know?
Like, we're reuniting to do a show.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We don't want to do that. So it'll
Right.
just be like, oh, okay, we just felt like playing a show, or we felt like doing this tour, or, you know, whatever, or
Mhm.
we didn't, you know. But the important part about this is that when I decided to go solo with
Mhm.
this, it was a very purpose driven thing.
Mhm.
There were a lot of things that I needed to get in touch with, I needed to deal with, in order to get back to where I was. Because with Voice That's Fire, there was a definite outlet for anger. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? There was a definite outlet for me to be like, I'm pissed off about this stuff. I'm angry about this stuff. But after a while, that really goes, you know what I mean? You can't just subsist on that.
Mhm.
There has to be a little bit more substance than just being pissed, you
Mhm.
know? And I had to start realizing, well, why? Am I really only angry at these issues? Because it doesn't seem to me like I am. There seems to be a deep seated anger and a brokenness that I'm lashing out about. And that's not really honest, you know?
Mhm.
So I started to delve into those type of things, because I started a band called The Casting Out for a while.
Mhm.
And honestly, that whole thing is a blur to me, because I was drunk the whole fucking time. I was miserable. I was like trying to figure out what was wrong with me.
Mhm.
And it turns out, looking into these things and really getting in touch with, I mean, I knew that I had experienced sexual abuse in the church that I was in as a child,
Oh, wow.
but I had internalized it so hard, and took it in so far that, like, I wasn't allowing myself to really realize what had happened and
Mhm.
to what extent. And that was creating a lot of anger, and it was creating things where I was hurting other people, not physically, but like
Right.
I was creating hurt out of my hurt, you know? And I was angry, and I was upset, and I didn't know why, and I couldn't control myself. And I was drunk all the time. I was on drugs, drunk, just all the time fucked up,
Mhm.
as much as I possibly could be to numb the pain.
Sure.
And with this, I remember the first song I wrote for my solo stuff was Echoes off of
Okay.
Feral Hymns.
Uh-huh.
And that details what happened, you know, not obviously not in detail, it's a bit more poetic, but
Mhm.
it speaks to what had happened. And I knew that speaking that out, I was going to have to also speak it out publicly,
Mhm.
which I didn't want to do.
Yeah, and
It
talk
was
about being
terrifying.
vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also knew that that first album had to just be me and a guitar. It couldn't be a full band like I have now. You
Right.
know, it couldn't be this upbeat, joyful, political fucking like crazy fest thing. You know,
Mhm.
it had to be dark. It had to really get out. And that was the progress. I was like, I'm going to start here and I'm going to find this healing that I need. I'm going to do this very purposefully.
Mhm.
And so I started out just me and a guitar, and I wrote Echoes, and I started writing these other songs. And they were dark and they were painful, and I started playing shows. And there were points where I wasn't actually able to get through some of the songs. Like Echoes, I'd play, and here in my heart, I wrote the words "You don't own me." I
Mhm.
would just lose it right at that spot and have to sort of regain myself. And fortunately, people who were at these shows, they were there for the message as well, and they understood what was going on because I'd talk about it, and they were very supportive of that, you know.
Mhm.
But going through that was such a healing process, and being able to speak it out in public, and not only that, but to be able to go out on stage and say, "This happened to me." It caused not only for me to be angry and for me to be hurt, but it also, unfortunately, like, guys, we are not programmed in this society to speak emotionally, or
Right.
at least with emotions that aren't anger, that aren't frustration, that aren't, those are the only emotions we're allowed to have. So when
Mhm.
we rage out, people are like, oh, well, he's a guy,
Right.
you know, as opposed to at being a very unhealthy way of dealing with just wanting to break down and cry, wanting someone to hold you, wanting to be loved, wanting to be cared for, wanting to be able to speak out these things without feeling like you're not a man anymore,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Um, and not only that, but it's doubly hard for men who've been sexually abused to
Yeah.
deal with that because you're constantly trying to prove yourself because you feel so violated, you know,
Mhm.
and society wanting you to be this tough guy and this, like, you know, yeah, you a lot of times you sort of lash out in the opposite direction. It's like you're trying to have sex with as many girls as you can have it, like, to prove something, you know.
Mhm.
And it's horrible and it hurts other people, and that's what sucks about it the most, is not just that you're hurting, but you then use that to use other people and hurt other people.
Mhm.
And so I had to break that cycle. And so that's where it began. And
Wow.
as I got through that album, as I started speaking on this, and as other people came up to me, and it was awesome having guys come up to me, or even better, wives, girlfriends, people like that, who are like, look, my husband or boyfriend couldn't come up and talk to you because he's out in the car crying right now,
Mhm.
but thank you so much. Like, I didn't understand. He couldn't open up to me. He couldn't tell me what was going on. And now we can talk about these things. He can open up to me. We can get him counseling. We can get help. And it's like, it rearranged their relationship. You know what I mean? It made
Yeah.
everything like, how awesome is that? You know what I mean?
That is
That
so yeah.
you can give people that kind of peace and understanding, where this poor girl was just lost. Like, I don't know, like, we're going to break up because I can't handle it anymore, you know.
Uh-huh.
Rightfully so. But then they go on to have this beautiful relationship because then he can finally speak,
Yeah,
you know,
communicate to her. Wow.
communicate. So, but and then past that, having that began that healing. And then as
Mhm.
I was, you know, past that, thinking about going into the next album, I'm like, well, I'm feeling a bit better. You know what I mean? I'm
Mhm.
feeling like I can sort of take this on with a band. I'm going to get, you know, with Working Title, I added a full band.
Right.
Hadn't named them yet, but added a full band.
Mhm.
And the album is more sort of about the ups and downs of life. You know what I mean? Once you get through all that brokenness, how it's not going to be a success after that.
Mhm.
You're not going to come out of that and go, I'm all better. You know, it's just not. You're going to fail, and that's okay. And it's great. And you're going to for the rest of your life. There's going to be those points where you just crash. And you need to be okay about that. And you need to be kind to yourself when that happens, and just understand it's always going to happen and you'll be okay, you know. So with Working Title, and then going through that and then getting that further affirmation, well, unfortunately in the middle of Working Title, the pandemic hit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Did you put the record out before the pandemic hit?
Yeah, and then we were basically on like the first tour in the US in March of 2020.
Did you play any shows? Or
we played 5 shows. We played all the way up into Canada, and then we came back into Portland, Maine, and that was our last show. Philly, Boston, all these other big spots got canceled.
Did you start seeing like a dwell of, or people like kind of not showing up?
The first show we played in Ohio was great. After that, maybe 2 to 3 people would show up at the shows.
Oh, really?
You know? Yeah, it was like, that was the last show where it was like people weren't aware yet of what was going on. After that, it was like, oh, fuck no, we're not going out. Like,
right.
And so we played a few more shows and went, okay, it's time, you know? And so we drove all the way home, and it sucked because we're all sitting there like, well, it's going to be a few weeks, maybe a month, right?
Yeah. This will never shut. Yeah, that's how everybody felt. It's like, this will never come to America. What are you talking about?
It's fine. It's fine.
We're good.
We'll get through it. We got through all these other viruses. We're good. You know. So, and then we didn't, and it sort of sucked because it's like I didn't get to fully put forth that album, but at the same time, I was able to. You know what I mean? I wasn't able to really get it out into the world as much as I would have liked to. But now I can play some of those songs anyway with
on your sets,
the Rebel Song stuff. But I guess that album I didn't really need to. I just needed to do it for me, you know. And what I really needed to get to was this album.
Okay.
And that was the whole point of all of this, was to get back to the point where I could speak on these political and social issues without raging out, you know, without this like I guess like I can't think of the word, but like displaced anger, you know, because that's not what I think. I mean, maybe people do need that, but I just don't need to put it out anymore. I don't care to do that. I'm not angry, you know. There are issues that need to be attacked, and they need to be attacked assertively, but I don't know if they need to be attacked angrily. We've had enough anger. Like the amount of anger that we have constantly, people need love. They need to be loved on right now. And that is what a Nathan Gray and the Iron Roses show is today. It is us going out there, dancing, being joyful, while fully understanding that life is not just this joyful, happy-go-lucky thing, but loving on people. Part of a show that you would come out to is affirmation, is me speaking between songs and telling people how welcome they are, how loved they are, how cared for they are, and how safe they are in this space. And that we can dance and have a good time and speak about issues and speak about the hurts and the sorrows we go through together, while understanding that we can help ourselves, we can heal ourselves together in this community. And that's what's been so great, is coming back to that place where people are still coming up to me and telling me about their hurts and their sorrow and their brokenness, but it's in a different spirit to an extent. Because what's so cool is like I've been able to build this diverse band, the Iron Roses. They don't all look like me. You know what I mean? There's a lot of white guy bands out there, and I don't intend to create another one. So I've purposefully created a band that an audience can see themselves in.
Oh, I
Um,
like that. That's really
that
awesome.
I think it's important, and I think it's important for the music that we put out, that I don't think everyone is going to be comfortable after, because part of my show is now a mission.
Mhm.
It's a ministry. If, excuse the expression, it's because I don't know what else to call it. I
Right.
had someone come up to me and say, I feel like I was just part of a secular revival. Like, and that was beautiful. It was awesome. That's exactly what it is.
Uh-huh.
Um, is having somewhere like, if let's say someone who has uh, been hurt in their life by someone who looks like me,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be the person they can talk to. But maybe
Right.
they can talk to Jalen. Maybe they can talk to Becky. Maybe they can talk to Phil. Maybe they can talk to someone else in my band that maybe mirrors their experience. Maybe mirrors someone that they see comfort in
Mhm.
how they look and how they appear to them. Um, so that's really the mission of Nathan Gray and the Iron Roses, is to get out there and play music that's uplifting, that's joyful, that's healing, while also realizing that that can't be the end of it.
Uh-huh.
That can't be it all. Because if we're looking at the political is personal, is political. It's all connected.
Mhm.
When you create happy people, you get politics and social issues which come from happy hearts, that come from hearts that aren't broken. We see it so often now, that all that greed and that bigotry and that horrific behavior we see, it comes from broken hearts. You cannot tell me that those people on January 6th that stormed the Capitol were happy, fulfilled people.
Right.
You just cannot
That's
tell
a
me
great
that.
point. Yeah.
Those were broken hearts which were used by horrible, fucked up people
Mhm.
who in part who said who saw the hurt in their heart and said, let's blame it on them. Let's
Right.
blame it on this person. That will make me money. That will gain me popularity if I can focus your anger and your hatred on others.
That's a
So we have to be different.
You're
We
right.
have to be different. We have to attract those hearts. We can't look at those people and just go, disgusting, horrible people. We have to say, those are broken hearts that I need to be attracting. We can't let the hateful and the bigoted attract them. We can't let those people use their brokenness to hurt others.
Mhm.
We have to be there in their place. We have to be like, I see you. I
Right.
see that hurt. And I also hear the shitty things you're saying. And we're gonna block that out for a second. We're gonna talk about where it's coming from, you know? And I want to assert that I feel that that is people who look like me's job
I
right now.
love that. Yeah.
It
I love
is,
it's
it is,
like
it is, it's not the place or the job of people who are being hurt by those people. And
Mhm.
that is a distinction we need to make right now so that people don't misunderstand me. I do not think that people in the LGBTQ community or Black people or anyone who is actually actively being oppressed by these people need to try to love on those people.
Mhm.
That's not your job. That's my job. And
I love that
that is
perspective.
people who look like me should be on the front lines right now, interceding
Sure.
in this situation and being able to take the insults a little bit, being able to take the bullshit a little bit, and giving out love to people who are still able to accept it. Because some of those people are, they really
Mhm.
are. It's going to be hard work. It's going to suck, and you're going to feel like smacking them right in the fucking teeth. But at the end of the day, these are people who have been hurt. These are people who have been broken. These are people who are being used right now. And that's sad. That's
Mhm.
not something to be angry about. That's something to be sad about.
Mhm.
That's something to feel like we should at least try, you
Mhm.
know? And there are some people you just can't help.
Right.
There is, if you put in the hard work and they're still there, it's like, okay,
Right.
it is what it
Right.
is, you know. But there are also people, and I've seen it happen,
Mhm.
who have like come over, and maybe we don't fully agree on politics and social issues, but we don't have to.
Right.
We do have to agree, though, that the right for human beings to exist is not a political issue.
Mhm. I love
It's
it. I
not.
love the message.
We
And
Thank
sorry,
you.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, that was it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I love the message, and I can't wait to see how this all kind of unfolds. Like when you're doing a big tour, and I know you're playing Nashville, so I can't wait to see you. And
Yeah, that'd be great. I love Nashville.
Yeah, and the record is so awesome. I mean, the title track of the album is great, but I love "Don't Wait Up." Like, there's so many awesome songs on the record, and I saw that Brian McTernan produced it, which is so rad.
Yep.
I had a chance to interview him, and obviously
Oh, he's
Battery is a
great.
massive band that he has, and all the production he's done in his days. And I just want to say it's a killer record, and I can't wait to see you guys perform it.
I can't wait to do it live. We have a lot of practice to do, but
Sure.
but it's fun because with creating this band and this live experience, it's going to be fun to see what the next album does. Even, you know what I mean? Because I feel it's going to grow from here and just gain a lot of energy and a lot of different something new. And that's really what we want to put out there. Is just something that people haven't seen before. You're going to hear the album and hopefully you're going to love that. But then I hope you come to the show and see something even more, you know, than what you would get from just sitting there and listening to an album.
I love it. I love it. And I appreciate you doing this today. Thank you so much, Nathan. You've been awesome. This has been so great. I do have one more quick question. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Advice for aspiring artists. I would jokingly say, quit, because you're flooding the market. But no, I would say for aspiring artists, there are a lot of catchphrases I could use. There are a lot of, don't give up on your dreams, stuff like that. Something that I think is more important to say right now, though, for especially people who want to go out in the world and perform, never forget the debt you owe to those you are performing for. It is so important because we see it now with things coming to light, with bands going out, people coming forward that have been hurt by these bands who go out because they do not have respect for the people they are performing for. And they are going out to take, not to give. And that is so important. No one owes you anything. You are there to minister and to help others. You are there to, even if you're just there to entertain, that is in and of itself a gift to people. And people will trust you. That is very important to understand, whether you want to accept that responsibility or not. People are going to trust you because you gave them something special and you touched their heart when they needed it the most. Do not take advantage of that. Do not be that person. Bring it back.